Hello everybody, it's confession time. You see, about 6 months ago I bought a new addition to the Craig on Cars family, and other than a brief cameo it made in the recent video I shared with you introducing my Lexus LS 600HL, crikey, that's a mouthful, isn't it? And you can watch that video up here if you haven't already seen it. I've rather selfishly been keeping it all to myself. I'm clearly talking about this, my 2003 VW Lupo GTI. So today I'd like to put that right and introduce the car to you, explain why I've bought it and what my initial impressions have been, and also to talk about the cost of ownership in that first 6 months. So if that's something you'd like to learn more about, please do keep on watching. And if you're a new viewer to the channel, please do consider hitting that subscribe button and hitting the bell icon to be notified when new content goes live. An interesting fact, by the way, my analytics are telling me that 98% of all viewers on the channel are not subscribed. Why not? Come on, hit that button and join us for the journey. So let's get on with it. Welcome to Craig on Cars. So let's start off by addressing the elephant in the room. I am of course talking about size. It's tickled quite a few people in my immediate circle that I've chosen to buy such a small car. The Lupo's only 3.5 meters long. That's about 1 meter shorter than the average UK car. And for context, the original classic Mini is only just over 3 meters long. This Lupo is properly pocket-sized, but I fit in it absolutely fine, quite comfortably in fact. There's plenty of room up front, even for a man with a fine physique such as myself. I've been incredibly lucky over the past couple of years to drive some really cool cars, both through filming for the channel, and I'll include a link in the description below to the playlist for some of those really cool cars. But it's also been nearly 6 years since I bought my 1997 BMW 8 Series, and it's a car that to this day I still very much love driving. But as time has gone on, and with an affliction for buying cars that I'm sure many of you share, I often find myself wondering, could less be more? Now, don't get me wrong, big powerful cars absolutely have their place, but with big powerful cars quite often comes big weight, much complexity and higher running costs. What I found myself longing to experience was something the complete opposite to the BMW. Something small, something light, and something simple. Back to basics, if you will. Reconnecting with the act of driving. The search for a new car was on. At first, my focus was on iconic hot hatch heroes from the 80s and 90s, things like the Peugeot 205 GTI, the Renault 5 Turbo, or even the Clio Williams. But I quickly discovered that values for such iconic cars have gone way beyond my means, with even high mileage, tired and broken examples that you sometimes see at auction selling for more than I'd be comfortable paying. The last thing that I could risk was buying a car and then spending the same again, or even more, on making it right. I may have already done that once. So my attention moved to obscure 80s and 90s cars that you no longer see. Things that would fit in perhaps at a Festival of the Unexceptional show. Base spec mediocrity seems to be all the rage at the moment. And whilst there were several listings that caught my eye, I just couldn't make my mind up. Until one Friday afternoon, when I was aimlessly scrolling through my social media feeds, and I came across a post directing people to a piston heads advert for this very car. I froze with excitement. The advert wasn't overly descriptive, there weren't that many photos. I could see from the online MOT history that the car had done hardly any mileage in the previous 5 years, something that's not always a good thing. But knowing just how rare these little cars are, only around 6,000 were made worldwide, with fewer than 1,000 of those coming to the UK, and combined with nostalgic romance memories of my old Mark IV GTI and recalling these cars first coming out at the turn of the century when I was sort of coming of age. 3 days later, I found myself being collected from a remote train platform in the deepest corners of the English countryside by a stranger and his dog. What could go wrong? Well, I completely lucked out. The car was in great condition. Low mileage, only 65,000. It had been garaged for at least the past 10 years. And whilst information on its history hadn't been overly forthcoming before I travelled, I was presented with a large folder full of neatly organised paperwork documenting its history, a very comprehensive one, right back to the day it was made. It was clear that every previous owner had cherished this car. It turns out that the seller was in fact a notable figure in the motorsport world and was using the car increasingly rarely on fine summer days, and was just simply too busy to have spent too much time preparing an advert for the sale. There was only going to be one outcome, and that was that it was now coming home with me. So a deal was done, and I bravely set out on a 6+ hour drive home, covering some 250 miles. That's more than the car had done in the previous 3 years. Whether that's brave or stupid, I'll let you decide. But either way, the car didn't skip a beat. It's great on little corners like this. The car didn't skip a beat, and even the aircon blew ice cold. By the time I got home, it was obvious that this was the kind of car that I'd been searching for. It was small and light. The Lupo's only about 930 kilograms, with direct go-kart-like handling, especially on the small country roads like this, with an instant throttle response. I'd say performance is nippy, more than outright fast, but that 1.6 litre engine is definitely powerful enough for the car. And of course, with it being so slow, you feel like you're going faster than you really are anyway. You can have lots of fun within the speed limits. The car is old enough that it feels a little bit retro and an occasion to be in it. And Volkswagen have done a really good job at filtering down all of that big boy GTI design language from the larger models into this tiny package. Anybody that's familiar with late 90s Volkswagen hardware will feel right at home in this car, and it's great to be back in a car with the blue and red lit dials in front of you. Whilst perhaps not one of those dream choices like the Peugeot 205 GTI, I very much think this is the perfect candidate to help me answer that question about whether less really can be more. So please do subscribe to the channel and join me on that journey as we find that out in the months ahead. Now, in the introduction, I mentioned that it's been 6 months since I bought the car, and in that time I've been using the Lupo for the occasional weekend drive, for attending local car meets, and for a short number of weeks I actually used it as my daily driver after selling the Volvo V70, a task which it undertook quite admirably, although using it every day did help focus my desires for a comfort-orientated daily driver, which ultimately led to the purchase of the Lexus LS. The stiffer sport suspension on this car, combined with the poor surfaces of our UK roads, did, for me at least, make driving the Lupo every day a little bit of a chore. Although that doesn't detract at all from this car being the perfect antidote to modern driving, but more so probably for the occasional weekly drive more than every day. So how much has the car cost in this first 6 months of ownership? Well, as soon as I got the car home, I booked it into the garage for a full inspection. I wanted some peace of mind that there were no hidden nasties lurking. At the same time, even though the car had only had a service a few hundred miles before with the last owner, I could see in the service history that the cam belts hadn't been changed for quite some time, the usual interval at least. So a full service was undertaken, and with the 1.6 litre engine in this car having 2 cam belts, that was a more expensive service at just under £600. That doesn't need to be done for another 6 years. The inspection raised a few red flags. The rear coil springs weren't in the best condition, and the front suspension arms and ball joints were starting to delaminate. Mindful of the fact that the car's had a completely clean MOT history with 0 advisories for the past 10 years, I started researching the parts we'd need for this work to be done. And that's where things started getting complicated. A simple car I was looking for, wasn't it? You see, coil springs easily and readily available. Suspension arms and ball joints for the Lupo, again, readily available, or so I thought. Well, it turns out that the Lupo GTI doesn't share every component with lower Lupo models. And the ball joints is one of them. They're a completely different size for the GTI. So when you buy a suspension arms that are the right size, that come with ball joints already on them, they don't work on this car. Volkswagen no longer sell ball joints for the Lupo GTI because the car's now over 20 years old. I suppose why would they? And I suppose because the car was so low volume, hardly any aftermarket companies make the GTI ball joints either. So after scouring all of the owners forums and owners groups online, it quickly became apparent that these ball joints are pretty much impossible to get hold of in the UK. And by this point I had my head in my hands. I just bought a car only a few weeks before that now was at risk of being taken off the road for such a small and cheap part. A ball joint is what, £5 to £8? Crazy. But I luckily found a German website selling an aftermarket part from a company called RTS, who do make ball joint specific for the Lupo GTI, and at a cost of only €15 for both. So those were quickly ordered and shipped over from Germany, and the cost of all of that work then being done, replacing all of those parts, came to just under £500. Add on to that then the cost of the tracking that needed to be done afterwards, £40, and the following MOT, £60, which it passed with flying colours, another year with 0 advisories. Well done, Lupo. And a new rear wiper of £5.29 that I bought not long after having the car. My total costs in the first 6 months are roughly just under £1,200, which seems like a lot, doesn't it, for 6 months, especially when you compare what my costs on the BMW, which is a big V8 4.4 litre monster, in the first 2 years at only £1,200. It does seem like a bit of a hit. But that said, some of that work at least didn't have to be done right then. It may well have been fine for this first MOT with me. But I've now got peace of mind. Everything is good, and costs as we move forward should be lower. So what next for the mighty little Lupo? Well, I'm going to carry on enjoying it, of course. In fact, I'm going to keep the BMW in winter storage for a few months extra whilst I embark on my journey to find out whether less really can be more. And I'd really like you to join me on that journey. If you're not already a subscriber, please do consider hitting that subscribe button and hit the bell icon to be notified when future content goes live. And get involved. If there's anything you'd like to see in future content on the Lupo, then please do comment below and let me know what you're thinking. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.